Hey up troops, hey Littleton here again with another video. We're back in the shooting range. Why? Because sights, especially 1Xs and ACOG/2.5s, have changed for the entirety of Year 9 and beyond. Let's talk about it. So there's three things you need to take away from this video. Number one, the HOLO A reticle has changed, which means it's opened the door for all the other 1x reticles to now be viable. Number two, 1.5 scopes as a whole don't exist in Siege anymore. There is zero 1.5 scopes. Number three, the 2.5 level zooms, which are the classic ACOGs, now include the reticle that used to be the 1.5. So the 1.5 scope is now a 2.5. The reticle looks the same, but it zooms into 2.5 times. That's enough chat. Let's have a look at what sight I think you should be using for Year 9 and onwards. Enough waffling. Let's get stuck into it. Right then, starting with red dot A. And what I'm going to do is, I've noticed if we walk up to the front of here and we put our center dot in the middle, you see how it pretty much fills the middle of the crosshair here? That's going to be important, because what you want to know is, in an ideal world, the smaller the dot in the middle, the better the sight, as in the more accurate you're going to be able to hold pixels. This is why HOLO A has been supreme for years and years and years. But red dot A, just having a look at the casing around the outside, or whatever you want to call it, the sight housing, not bad. You can still see quite a lot, although that bit on the right hand side is, if we pretend this double door is a doorway that we're going to hold in the game, that could block out an entire doorway depending on where you're going to be holding. Feels good. The dot's pretty clean. You can't argue with the reticle, can you? And if we clear it, remember that the red dot covers the hole in the middle. I don't hate this. I don't think I would ever use it, because I think there's better out there. Now, we'll move on to the big change shortly once we get to HOLOs. But this, spoiler alert early on in the video, might be my new favorite. Red dot B is right up there for me, this especially because of the sight housing. Now, if you see the dot itself, it's actually a little bit smaller than the previous one. That fits inside the crosshair okay. What I'm actually just going to do quickly, which would make life a lot easier for everybody watching this video, is make the sight pink. You're going to be able to see the dot a bit easier. That fits inside the crosshair there. In terms of sight housing, if we're holding a door, the sight housing on this, I think, is probably the cleanest of the lot. You can see all around it. I like this one. It feels good. I think this is the one I'm probably going to use more this season. Started using it last season a little bit. I think I'm going to use it more this season. Moving on to red dot C. Now, this used to be a favorite of mine until red dot B got changed. So red dot C, let's clear this off. The dot just feels a bit thicker. Yeah, so the dot is a bit thick. It doesn't quite fit it. It does fit into the cross. A bit more like red dot A, not quite as thin as red dot B there. If you were holding a door, not bad. There's a decent amount of, I think, probably one of the better housings for the sight. The bottom right is obviously covered quite a bit with whatever dial that is that you can change. What is that? For anyone who's got this kind of thing in real life, you see that dial in the bottom right? What does that actually change? Because you can see it's dialed into something. Is it like the opacity of the dot or something? But this is a favorite of mine. I don't know why, but I prefer this to red dot A. Even though I think red dot A is probably the clearer sight. I don't know why. The dots are pretty much the same size. But for some reason, I prefer this to red dot A. I like that one. Right, moving on to the HOLOs, and this is where the big change is for this season. This is where you're probably going to see more people trying different 1Xs because of the change that's come to HOLO A. So, HOLO A used to have a super thin middle dot, and it still does, right? The middle dot there is definitely thinner than red dot A and red dot C. I think it's probably a little bit thinner than red dot B. But it used to be just like a couple of pixels, and you could hold the nastiest angles. Like if you were holding through to this door from here, and on the old HOLO, you could hold like this kind of angle. You still can. Like, you're still going to see if somebody's there. But it's not quite as accurate, and I actually quite like the change. In terms of the sight housing, it's pretty decent. You can see that if we were going to be holding this area here, I'm trying to block the door as we've done with other sites. You can see pretty much of the most of the door. Not quite as good as red dot B, and you'll see that that's a pattern that emerges as we go through them. I actually really like the change to HOLO A. Yes, the reticle's a little bit thicker, but it just balances it more with the rest of the sights that are out there. It's not the obvious choice anymore. It still is the thinnest one we've seen so far, I believe. Let me just make a mental note of that and just check red dot B again very quickly. Just see if HOLO A is thinner than red dot B. I think they're about the same, aren't they? I think they're about the same, but this sight housing is definitely cleaner. Then we move on to HOLO B. Now, this is an interesting one for me. I would need to go back and double check what the middle dot of HOLO B looks like, but that middle dot is also about the same size as HOLO A. and also about the same size as red dot B. Pretty similar in size there. Let's check what the housing's like if you're holding a door. This one is actually quite clean. I feel like if you... There's some... Why is that?
Revelations yet?
That speaker's so loud. I don't know why, but you know like the bit that's around the sight on this, like around the reticle? I don't know why, it just puts me off with how... I don't like the pattern around. If it was just a circle, I think I would probably use this more. But now that HOLO has the thicker reticle, I think you're going to see more people using this because the housing's cleaner. And now that the HOLO has the same dot size as this, like the middle dot is the same size, I think you're going to see more people using this. Moving swiftly on to HOLO C. Does anyone use this? I use this on super shorties as a bit of a joke because I know I'm never going to need to ADS. There's something about it that I just don't like. The dot is the same as the other HOLOs, HOLO A and B. It's the same size dot. I don't get the lines. In terms of housings, it's thicker around the edge than HOLO B. About the same as HOLO A, I'd say. I just don't like the reticle. There's something about it that I don't like. Maybe if there was 2 vertical lines as well, it would be okay. But the sight itself is quite sort of... what's the right word I'm after? It's... I don't want to say long, but like the distance from the top of the bottom of the side housing is quite small. Not a fan, personally. The Cybertruck HOLO, as people call it. We'll then move on to HOLO D, and I genuinely don't think anyone uses HOLO D seriously. If you use HOLO D, it's time to give up. No, I'm just kidding. It's preference, isn't it? But I prefer having a dot where the bullet lands, not a gap where the bullet lands, personally speaking. Thinking about it, I suppose it makes more sense to have a gap there because you wait until the head has filled the gap and then shoot. I guess that makes more sense, but especially in terms of sight housing on this one, it's pretty chunky. There's just something about it that just doesn't sit well with me. I think the sight, even just looking at it there, it looks ugly. It's one of the old Russian HOLO from the, like when Kapkan and Tachanka, etc. could only use that type of sight. Then we go to, oh, wrong one. Then we go to Reflex A. So we've got 3 types of reflexes. This hasn't changed. If you like Reflex A before, you like Reflex A now. Remember, your bullet goes at the top of the triangle, not in the middle of the top of the triangle, so to speak. Sorry, it goes at the top of the triangle, not in the middle of the triangle, which, like, this isn't a crosshair that you would put over someone's head. You would just put, like, if you wanted to shoot there, you would just put the triangle above it, and that's where the bullet would go. You wouldn't put the bullet there. You wouldn't put the triangle in the middle, because then the bullet's going to go above you. You can see the difference between the two there. I think that's fairly obvious, but it's worth saying. This is a super clean housing. If you're holding a door there, I think you see a lot of the if you're holding an angle here, you see a lot of that door. It's also a really small sight when you look at it like this. It's like just a small little square. I quite like it. I think it's clean. I do use this on some guns because I think it works well. But only some guns and not all guns, which is a bit weird. Like, I use it on Valk's MPX, but I wouldn't use it on, say, AC's AK-12. Why is that? I don't know. Good question. Thanks for asking. Moving on. We go to Reflex B, which is a favourite of mine until it got changed. So Reflex B never used to have that chunky bit down in the bottom left. You see that sort of, whatever that, the bit that the skin attachment's on, that never used to be there. And this was a really clean sight. Holding a door is incredibly nice. You know, there's tons of it that you can see there, unless you're holding it this way around, and then there is more cover in the door, but it's lower than most other sights. You can see the reticles above where the housing is. I think this is one of the most accurate sights and the cleanest sights. If that big bulbous area on the bottom left where the skin is wasn't there, I'd probably use this more. Right, yeah, I like this one personally. I use this on the SMG11 sometimes. I do mix that one up every now and then. Finally, we've got Reflex C. I say finally, not quite finally. Reflex C, which is very, very similar to Reflex A. The reticle's exactly the same. It's just the housing that's slightly different. This is more of a curved shape. When you're holding a door, there's more of the housing that you see that gets in the way on the right-hand side there. Not so much on the left, but the right-hand side is definitely chunkier and gets in the way. I don't think you would use this over Reflex A personally, but again, it's all personal preference, isn't it? It's whatever you're into. Finally, last but no means least, we've got the iron sights, which remember now reduces the time to aim down the sights depending on what gun you're using. The ADS time on the iron sights is now a lot faster. Are you going to see more iron sights? I don't think so. I think the odd iron sight is nice. Don't forget, people like playing MP7 iron sights, the ARX of Iona and the SC3000K of Zero, and also obviously Zero's MP7 have got the same iron sights if you wanted to try that. I don't hate iron sights. I just don't think they're particularly clean, especially this is not a great one. It does feel cool to use iron sights sometimes, and obviously now you get a bonus of the ADS time being a bit faster. You can see how long that takes. If we move to a 1x, you can see it'll be a little bit longer. I think it's like 10 or 15% longer. You can see it definitely takes longer to bring it to the eye. And then if we use the magnified scopes, which we'll get into another time, that's even longer than that. You can see now. It's so weird seeing the 1.5 at that range. Yeah, you can see it takes even longer. In fact, let's have a quick look at the magnified scopes while we're here. Why not? So if you've got a 2.5x, a 2.5 times now, the 1.5 is now become an ACOG level zoom. So the reticle for the 1.5 still exists. It's just that it's a 2.5 times scope now. And whilst it's still super clean, like that reticle is really clean, the middle dot and the circle around the middle dot have gotten so much chunkier that I think if you wanted to use a 2.5, I think the ACOG is the way to go. Housing wise, as we know, we all know the 1.5 really well. Sorry, I had to cough. Keeping that in the video. We know the 1.5 really well. The housing's pretty clean. It doesn't obscure too much. But I think if you want to go down the 2.5 road, you can't beat the classic ACOG. It looks good on the gun. The actual, even though it's weird, isn't it? Because that zooms in the same as what the 1.5 reticle just did, but that feels like it zooms in further. The reticle is fantastic at range if you need it to be. The housing itself isn't too bad. It is chunkier on the right side, but bear in mind, because you zoom in that much with a 2.5, like you can see the door anyway from there. If you were using a 1x ADS in here, you wouldn't be able to see that part of the door through the scope. I prefer the ACOG more than the others when it comes to the 2.5. There's one more, obviously, the Russian ACOG, which I think, again, going back to the Cybertruck HOLO, if you use this, I think there's probably, not saying something wrong, but I just don't, surely you don't think that's the cleanest 2.5 out there, surely. I just don't think it looks nice at all, to be honest. I guess it's kind of similar to the 1.5, but the outer rings are a little less chunky. There's something about it that I just don't think looks very nice. If you were to die on a kill cam and you watch the kill cam and the guy's like this, and you're like, oh no, I've died to a Russian ACOG, what is going on? Still a 2.5 times. In terms of housing, really clean actually when you think about it like that. Like if we were trying to cover the door with the housing, you can't really cover it that much. Really clean housing. I just don't think the reticle's that nice. I think if you want to look at reticles, oh, not that, sorry. I think if you want to look at reticles, it really doesn't get much cleaner than the classic ACOG. It's actually getting me excited to go back and play the game with this arrow. In summary, in my humble opinion, the best 1.5 times, the best 1 times is definitely Red Dot B. HOLO A is still up there, but I think HOLO B is a bit cleaner. So in my opinion nowadays, I think it's probably going to be Red Dot B, HOLO B, and I think Reflex A is still really nice. When it comes to 2.5, the classic ACOG wins absolutely hands down. The 1.5 is still clean, but just the rings around it for me are just a little bit too chunky now. The dot itself isn't too bad, but the ring around it is a bit sort of distracting. I'm not a massive fan of that. Obviously, we know my thoughts on the Russian ACOG. Again, let me just reiterate this. It all comes down to preference. If you're on here, right, and you're playing well, and you're having a good time, and you're having fun, and you're using HOLO C, don't listen to anyone like me that says, oh, you're a bit of a weirdo for using HOLO C. Whatever you find comfortable to use is what is best for you. In my humble opinion, the one that's got less of a sort of housing around the sight, you know, when we were doing this test, the less of the housing around the sight and the cleaner the dot in the middle is the way you want to go. But if you're comfortable using this, crack on using this. It's whatever you feel happiest with, the best. So there we have it, all the scope changes for year 9 and onwards. Now the beauty of the HOLO A change means it just opens the door for every other 1 times, which now is viable. Before you could hold the tiniest little pixels with HOLO A, and it was the obvious choice because the reticle was so small, the dot in the middle of the reticle was so small, it was the obvious choice to use. Now, Red Dot B, I think, is a real contender. The beauty of the 1.5 being removed is genius because the 1.5 gave you the best of both worlds. You could fight up close and personal, you could hold long angles as well. Now you've got to pick. Do you want to be better at long range? Do you want to be better up close and personal? And you can't have both. Also, I like the fact that they've moved the 1.5 to the ACOG because a lot of people are going to want to use 2.5 times level zooms now. So at least there's 3 choices there as well, so you can mix up whatever feels comfortable for you. All in all, I think it's good changes that keeps things balanced and it keeps the game fresh as well. People who used to rely on the HOLO A, well, now you can't. Or you still can, you know, it's still probably one of the better sites, but it's not just the obvious choice anymore, and it just opens the door to a lot more creativity and a lot more freedom when it comes to customizing your weapons in terms of sights. As always, a massive thank you to everybody who gets involved with the channel and just even watches the videos. Obviously, we've had a bit of break when it comes to like Siege content for the last week and a half, and we've been in Brazil. But we're back here, we're back on the grind. Year 9 and beyond looks better than ever, and I can't wait to see what Siege has got in store for me, you, and everybody else involved in the community. Thanks ever so much for watching the video. Red.B is the option, in my opinion. See you next time. Cheers.